The leaders who have joined us, our learning discussion today, will share the story of how they applied lean thinking to design and develop Connecticut's hottest new restaurant. We'll hear about their minds before their wallets approach, centered on developing deep understanding of the customer value. The experiments called pop-ups and how this came together with leveraging the ideas of the team members to build a brand and the design of the operation to deliver remarkable results during this past year. It is an honor for me now to introduce to you Steve Crowley and Brian Reese from Service Physics, our coaches, and Rob Latronica and Aiken Taken, the co-founder of Hot Haven Chicken. Aiken, I think this is where I hand you over the mic.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Karen. Pleasure to be here today. Before we get started, we'd like to thank Karen and the LEI for giving us this opportunity to spend some time with everyone. So to kick things off here, Haven Hot Chicken is one of the first dedicated Nashville hot chicken restaurant concepts in the New England area. For those that might not be familiar with Nashville hot chicken, it originated in Nashville, Tennessee, here in the U.S., and is really centered around the thrill and heat of a perfectly fried piece of chicken. And speaking of the perfect piece of fried chicken, I'd like to introduce the founders here. And Rob, who's with me today on the call, is one of the co-founders of Haven Hot Chicken, and he is our chef extraordinaire, among other things. And he has gone through literally hundreds of recipe testings and critiques, and has brought us the product that we know and love today. We also have Craig Sklar, who's an operating partner and co-founder of Haven Hot Chicken, who manages a lot of the operations and business components of our brand. And then I'm Etkin. This is my third startup, and after a nice stint in the corporate world, working in innovation for a large CPG, I'm now excited to be a partner and co-founder of Haven and bringing crispy, crunchy, juicy, spicy, delicious hot chicken to Connecticut and beyond. And finally, we've partnered with Jason Sobosinski, who is a serial entrepreneur here in Connecticut, who has several decades of experience across a variety of industries. And that rounds out our founding team. So we all got together a couple of years ago and really developed this concept around Nashville hot chicken. We'd all been there, we'd enjoyed the food, we'd seen kind of the rave reviews around it. And when we came back to Connecticut here, where we're all based, we discovered that there was a void in the market. And so we all loved this food and this concept. And so, hey, why don't we bring this to the market ourselves? And so starting in the summer of 2019, we got really serious about development of the brand. So putting together all of the key components, rounding out and finalizing the founding team who would be contributing to the development of the business. And we got to work building out the brand and concept in earnest. Very early on, we knew that we would not only want to test the brand and the product market fit of Nashville hot chicken in Connecticut, but we also wanted to really test and iterate on our production and process in order to execute the concept correctly. So as Karen mentioned in the beginning, we started doing a series of pop-ups. Now these pop-up events were all in New Haven, Connecticut, in local downtown bars and restaurants that we would partner with. We would be one night only. We'd advertise exclusively via social media. And the idea was to pack a restaurant, serve as much hot chicken as we could, as fast as we could, and learn, collect data, and iterate, and then move to the next pop-up. So we did this for 3 pop-ups in 2019. And as you'll see there, that this is when we were introduced to Kaizen. This was a transformative moment for the business, which we'll definitely dive into in a bit more detail later. But after that moment, we had a fundamental shift in our strategy and operations and focus towards strong execution of our concept. And along the way, we gathered a lot of consumer insight. One of the key components of Nashville hot chicken is actually bone-in chicken, so thighs and breast bone-in chicken. And we would offer these menu items, and they wouldn't sell at all. And so we were able to hone and iterate our menu to optimize its size and also its offerings based on what the guests wanted, right? And this was a really important piece of insight and feedback for us. And then finally, little tidbits like vegetarians also love Nashville hot chicken, even though they can't eat chicken. And so developing menu items that allow us to accommodate different diets. And then halal was another big insight, where the halal community is often excluded from food trends. And so Haven Hot Chicken aims to be as inclusive as possible. And so sourcing halal chicken was possible for us, and we were able to include a large community here in Connecticut for us. And then a pandemic happened. We had to shut everything down. We had ambitious plans to open in early 2020, and we got pushed back. But because of our introduction to Brian and Steve and the service physics model and applying Kaizen to our business, we were able to virtually apply so many different learnings, tools, and resources into refining our concept, which we'll be talking more about a little bit later. But so finally, in October of 2020, we were able to open our first brick and mortar location in downtown New Haven, Connecticut, and the lines are starting, haven't stopped slowing down, and we continue to be busy despite the pandemic, which has been very exciting for us. And we're currently in process of finalizing our second location for expansion here in our state. But really, I think it's important for us to take a step back here and move back to December of 2019 and the initial exposure for Haven Hot Chicken to Kaizen and the service physics model. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve.
Great, thanks, Ekin. So at the same time Haven Hot Chicken was building their startup, Brian and I were building Service Physics as our startup. And Haven Hot Chicken gave us a great example to really hone in and develop our practice, starting with the definition that Brian and I had been exposed to early on, which is that lean thinking helps us deliver the most value with the fewest resources. But that really begs the question, what is value? It's one thing to open up, a whole lot of capacity to do more, but without understanding what value is from the customer perspective, really, you could just open up a whole lot of capacity to do more of the wrong stuff. So we had heard, some definitions that are around like value is anything the customer is willing to pay for, or every product has a job to do. So a product that does its job is valuable, but both of these definitions kind of left us wanting. So we dug deeper until we found a model that started to serve that question, answer it in a little bit more detail.
And so we came across this study and this set of research done by Bain & Co. and published in the Harvard Business Review that really helps to break down value from a guest's perspective into very discrete component elements, roughly in the four areas of functional value, emotional value, life-changing value, and social impact. And so companies can drive value by addressing these four kinds of different customer needs. And another stat that really put some direction into this thinking is that emotionally engaged consumers are 52% more valuable than those who are just highly satisfied. So it's actually not enough to just deliver a great product and have satisfied customers. As a brand and as a company, you're really looking for those emotional engagement opportunities to help you create differentiation and longevity in the market. And so going deeper into the framework that Bain & Company has spent 30 years researching and developing. And as I mentioned, companies will deliver those fundamental elements of value that address four kinds of needs: functional, emotional, life-changing, and social impact. And the more elements provided, the greater guests' loyalty and the higher the company's sustained revenue growth. And so this is roughly organized in a Maslow's hierarchy sort of framework, where you have those basic and core value elements at the bottom, and the higher up you go, the more sort of nice to have these values become, but also at the same time, the more impactful. As I mentioned, emotional value being 52% more impactful. And so the research behind this shows that if you take these value elements and you survey your guests or your customers, you can actually quantitatively give yourself a benchmark of how you're doing at delivering value to your guests. And so the data behind this shows that companies who score highly as rated by their customers on 4 distinct value elements will outperform companies who score highly on only 1 value element by 4x in terms of revenue growth. And so companies like Apple and Nike will tend to score highly on 8 or even 11 of these value elements. And so it's important to notice that as you move up the value pyramid, they're of course worth more in terms of the impact on your guest NPS and your company's performance. But no amount of emotional or social impact value will make up for a lack in a functional value element like quality. So quality really being, a key driver of value, and it doesn't matter how great your marketing department is, you'll never make up for a lack in quality. And so we really took this framework and rolled it into our practice of not just understanding work and the value that we think we can create through getting people to pay for things, but actually understanding how we can create capacity to deliver on emotional value, life-changing value, and social impact value, and help brands create differentiation and competitive advantage in the marketplace. So I'll turn it to Steve to talk more about how we do that.
Great. So at the same time, we were doing all of the research to put qual and quant behind the value elements. We were also teaching the team at Haven, the greatest hits of lean thinking. Really, what is the simplest concepts, what are the simplest concepts that you can get started with to just go and start practicing? So there's nothing in these next few slides that you can't learn in Kaizen Express or that you probably haven't heard before, but just to touch on a few of them. We taught them that work creates value and waste destroys it. And so this idea of the hammer and the nail is something that I probably speak with people about this weekly, if not daily. But the moment of value creation is when the head of the hammer strikes the head of the nail. Everything else is an opportunity for improvement. We also introduced them to the 7 wastes, asked the team to watch video and identify them, putting names to them. So once they become named, they can be eliminated. We also talked about how as your business grows, so if you think about this pie as the activity required to operate your business today, that activity grows with your business. If you're not addressing your waste as the business grows, the waste will grow faster than the value creation, which is why a lot of organizations, especially in our industry, that try to scale become a little bit top heavy and have trouble getting beyond that 5 location expansion before they topple. And then this was really a pivotal moment. And this was also done during the very early days of COVID. I can remember meeting with the team in a closed bar and restaurant. And we were still at the moment where we were, instead of shaking hands, we were touching elbows. We were sharing some bagels and coffee, but we weren't really comfortable with it. Brian and I decided to drive from New York to New Haven instead of taking the train. So it's just those early days where we were going through the beginning of that change curve. And we watched this video, and it's just 2 line cooks in a kitchen doing their job. And when you watch it the first time, it looks like they're working. But then when you do a spaghetti diagram and put pencil to paper and actually trace their motion around the kitchen, first chuckles, and then some cringes, and then a whole lot of learning. And then after that moment, you can't help but see waste everywhere. Everywhere you look, there's an opportunity for improvement. Which really was the catalyst for the team to get really serious about understanding every intricate detail of how food came from, the truck dropping off the raw product to the guest walking out of Haven Hot Chicken delighted.
Awesome. So moving back in a little bit into our brand development, I think through the guidance of the service physics team, one of the key components that we realized is that we needed to first of all decide and then understand what and who Haven Hot Chicken wanted to be, right? So by applying the Bain & Company value elements here, we did a series of internal voting in order to best understand what we thought Haven Hot Chicken represented and how it manifested itself in a brand. And by doing that, I think an interesting point here is that this was all done virtually and also across 4 co-founders who all have diverse experiences different outlooks on what business should be, what Haven Hot Chicken was supposed to become, and so on and so forth. And so this was a really important learning journey for the team. And this provides a structural foundation for how we're able to operate our company now. And, you know, I won't sugarcoat it. This took hundreds of hours, right? It was a lot of work, but at the end of the day, the foundation that it provides a company as it plans to grow and face obstacles has been invaluable as we've moved forward here. So as you'll see, we've really honed in. The team decided in a resonating fashion that quality was the single most important value element that we wanted to deliver on a consistent basis. We don't escape a conversation without talking about whether or not it delivers the right quality to our guests. We also felt strongly about design and aesthetics, making sure we had a fun, exciting, enticing, and emotionally engaging brand. We wanted to make sure it was fun. You know, it's Nashville hot chicken, right? It's supposed to be a shared experience. It's supposed to be about testing the limits of how spicy you're willing to eat your chicken. I know Steve likes his as spicy as absolutely possible. And so really, as we went through these components, we were able to identify which ones we thought were relevant to the Haven Hot Chicken brand and what we would be spending a lot of time focusing on to really dive into, you know, what quality actually means to us as a brand, right? What does sensory appeal truly mean? You know, there are multiple senses, right? How do we address each of them? How are we supposed to manifest those components into the actual experience of not just our food, but our physical and digital spaces, right? So moving from alignment on these value elements that we had decided to focus on, we then moved into digging into each of them in a lot of detail. And in order to do that, we utilized Retroboards. There are many templates and apps that offer this. I believe we used Fun Retro. And what we were able to do here, we were able to work through, ideate, brainstorm, and understand how we wanted each of our brand value elements to come to life. So we would have sessions. Each one of these screenshots is multiple 3-hour work sessions that we would have on Zoom. And you know, really detailed discussion intensive process, again, guided by Brian and Steve to make sure that we wouldn't get lost in little wormholes of detail and attention to certain things. But, you know, we basically walked through the guest journey. And by talking about the guest journey and how each of these components applied to each aspect of the guest journey, we were able to come up with tactical operational ideas on how each of the value elements addressed awareness, consideration, acquisition, service, repeat, and then loyalty and advocacy. By doing this exercise, we were able to be intentful and thoughtful about everything that we built. So this was all done before we had a physical brick and mortar location. So we were able to apply these foundational components of what we believe the business should be to the actual build out of the space. We were able to be intentional with how we structured, you know, not just workstations and operations and execution, but also how the experience for the guest looking into and then being a part of the space would be like. And so this was, again, a critical component of our journey. I mentioned it earlier, but as you go through this process, what you'll realize is once you have a foundational set of values to align with across a team, it makes problem solving that much easier. Everyone on the call that started a business is very well familiar that it's not just point A to point B, right? There's zigs and zags and problems come up and new business challenges arise. How do you want to grow? What do you want to change? How are we iterating? All of these things have discussions, points to be made, and conclusions, and then actions to set forward, right? And for each of these components, being aligned on what the brand is supposed to be allowed us to point to these things and look backwards on the experience that we had developing them in order to solve problems moving forward. And so I think the last component here, as we're applying the retail customer journey, is really how deep we dove into this ultimately. So through the use of Retroboards, which is kind of like a digital whiteboard, we took each component of the guest journey and really dove deep into each component of the guest journey and different components of how we wanted to, again, manifest our value elements. And by doing that, you know, again, we were able to code not just the build out of the space, but also the training of our team members, right? Our guest experience lead at every location, you know, is intentionally trained in a certain way to interact with guests in a certain way. As I'm sure many people on the call, this might be the first time you're hearing about Nashville hot chicken, and that remains true for a pretty large portion of the Connecticut population as well. You know, as a fairly new concept to the area, there's a large educational component. Thanks to the pop-ups that we had and through consistent guest feedback, we were able to account for that and make sure to incorporate that education component to our food offering in order to augment the experience. I know I've certainly been put in this position before, but it's always a little frustrating when you get a sandwich or a food item and it's so spicy that you can't eat it. That was the last thing we wanted for our guests. But then for other guests, that's exactly what they're looking for. They want that hottest possible thing to really test their mettle. And so ultimately, this entire process was really important for us to be intentional and thoughtful about how we interacted with guests, not just in a physical sense, but also how we interact with them on social media, through our digital channels, and the standards that we set for each of those work streams. So yeah, that kind of wraps up our kind of embracing the value elements pyramid and how we manifested that in the Haven Hot Chicken brand. And finally, that really locked us into a mission statement. This is probably one of the most difficult things that we had to put together. The first versions of these from each of the 4 co-founders were about 3 pages long. They were more manifestos rather than missions. But we ended up coming into that Haven Hot Chicken wants to satisfy the world's craving for something better. Haven brings great people together over the best food because feeding people is fun and eating happy is for everyone. And this breaks down a lot of the intent and thought behind what we're doing. We love and adore the product that we serve. We've put a lot of passion and hard work behind what we've created. But again, just like alcohol, food is a fantastic way to bring people together, right? Growing up at when I was a kid, dinner time was sacred, and it was often the only time when I got to see my entire family. One of 6 kids, so it was a hard challenge. But it really demonstrates the ability that food has to bring people together. We were intentional about saying the best food. We like to consider ourselves confident, not cocky, about the quality of the food that we're able to deliver to our guests. And so again, the last piece of breaking this down is that one of the core drivers of this business is making people happy. There's nothing like that first moment when somebody has their first Haven Hot Chicken sandwich, takes a bite, their eyes light up. Sometimes their brow starts sweating, depending how spicy it was. That moment and that experience and that feedback is just incredible. And finally, I spoke about inclusiveness and accessibility at the beginning when talking about the concept. We believe that eating happy is for everyone. Everyone should be able to enjoy Nashville hot chicken and Haven hot chicken. And so we strive to be as inclusive as possible so that everyone can share the love for Haven.
So the process of actually delivering this high quality product to the guests during the pop-up was a huge challenge for us as we were developing the brand. It it began with little things like, to Ekin's point, what are we actually serving? Are we serving bone-in chicken like they do in Nashville? Are we serving boneless chicken because that's what the customer apparently wants? And the pop-up experience allowed us a couple of different insights and also raised a couple of different questions for us as we went through this process. Initially, it was, for anyone who's actually in the restaurant space, when you go do a pop-up, you go to someone else's restaurant, you work within their space, with their equipment, in their setup, with their POS. All these different variables really presented a lot of challenges for us to deliver a quality product in a timely fashion. And, at our first pop-up, I think we were running like 45-minute ticket times, which for anyone who's done this before is just unacceptable. And it doesn't matter how good your chicken is. If someone has to wait 45 minutes, you've basically ruined their customer journey. So that presented the unique challenge of, well, we bring 300 covers of food and we have 180 minutes to serve these people. How do we do that? And that was really where we dug into lean enterprise with the process of our hero item, which is the sandwich. At Haven Hot Chicken now, it accounts for about 60% of our sales. And to really get into that, we had to map the flow of the material and the information. And, Steve and Brian made us do spaghetti diagrams of our own behavior at our pop-ups. And it really highlighted the moments where you were, over processing information, trying to communicate to the other people on the line while you're trying to push out hundreds of covers in an hour. It's just too much. And so it really highlighted a couple of things that we traditionally do in the restaurant world that ended up not serving us as we tried to scale and operate quicker. And for me, those two things were calling tickets and batch producing. The way I was trained for my entire career, if you have to make 10 items, you get a bigger pan and you do all 10 items at once. Well, turns out that when you actually go through this process and you make 10 items, it's faster to do them one at a time. And I remember getting into a little bit of a heated debate with Steve about whether or not this was actually true. And it turns out it was. So that led us to a couple of different things. One, the use of supermarkets as a way to pull inventory to create the sandwiches rather than batching a ton of chicken and then pushing it to the person who actually has to make the sandwiches. And this, as it says, linked the flow of information and the flow of inventory. If I'm the person making these sandwiches, I don't need to worry about, am I going to get this piece of chicken? It's just there. And then the person who's actually providing me with that piece of chicken doesn't need to worry about what I need. They just need to worry about making sure that piece of chicken is there. And this process allowed us to, move from 40-minute ticket times to 20-minute ticket times to 10-minute ticket times, just because we're eliminating so many different aspects of waste. And you can see it here. We use the TWI, or training within industry method, to really reinforce this process. And to do this, we argued over every step of the sandwich process. Where do you put the wrapping paper? Where do you put the buns? Which do you do first? Do you put the paper down or do you toast the bun first? Going through all of these things and then repeating the process, actually sitting there with a stopwatch and watching someone make the item. That takes 2 seconds. This takes 4 seconds. Do we need to do that? Can we do it a different way? Going through the E-racks, the eliminating, rearranging, adding, subtracting, combining, simplifying was a great help in doing this process. I was the one that actually mapped out everything on the previous slide, and the first iteration of it was ridiculous. There were lines going this way and that way of, I need to communicate this information to this person, I need to get this thing from over here. And all of that was eliminated by just going through the process and as a group deciding, what do we need to do and what do we actually not need to do, and how does this step deliver value to the customer, and always keeping the idea of delivering value to the customer central in every single thing you're doing. And after all of dozens of work sessions, we got the creation of the sandwich down to an 8-step process. And making one item at a time you will be able to make a sandwich in 34 seconds, or I can make a sandwich in 34 seconds. You could probably do it in 45, you know, and that was one of the huge, you know, strengths that we got out of working with Brian and Steve at Service Physics was you really identify, how does this step create quality? How does it create food safety? How do you create consistency across training and production so that you can take an employee where you just hired them and it's their third shift? Well, you teach them these 8 steps, and as long as that chicken's in that supermarket, you know, I can take someone fresh off the street and produce a quality product quickly every single time. And that was, you know, it's been instrumental in developing the brand and creating the following that we have. You know, now you can come into Haven Hot Chicken, you place your order, by the time you get your food, it's 4 minutes, start to finish.
That's great. Thank you, Rob, Aiken, Steve, and Brian. It's just incredible work you've done and learning you've had to share. It's really meaningful. Let's take a look at some of the questions that have come in and how they've been voted. If you think of them as we're talking, please continue to populate the Q&A so we can capture them all. If we don't get to answering them all here on our webinar today, we will gather them and answer them to you over time. One of the first questions here that has a few votes for it are, like, what are the largest factors for the waste found in the spaghetti diagrams that you did?
Team, I can take this. That's a heavy question because you know, you start to pull back layers on it, but I think most of the waste initially came from the traditional push systems that we have during peak periods in the kitchen. And it was exacerbated in this pop-up scenario where, you know, you post an opening time and everybody comes at the same time. So you're flat sat for hours. And the response in the kitchen is not to the work that's right in front of you. It's to the queue of literally like 100 people at the door that haven't even been sat yet. So there's a phrase that's used a lot in kitchens, and Rob's going to cringe a little bit and probably have feedback for me after this. But when people start calling for something all day, like I need Haven chicken all day or French fries all day. And basically it just means like, just keep making it because we're going to go through it. It's like, what if we just were making what we needed to do the work in front of us right now to serve the guest that's here right now. And I think when you flip that from that massive push to just pulling at the demand of the guest, it changed everything.
That's great. Thank you. You had a slide that represented votes. How did you address, there was a bit of lack of alignment in 5 of the votes. So what was your approach to not only understanding what was collected, but then how did you bring people together around that to get an alignment?
Yeah, I can take this one. Thanks, Karen. So this is sometimes it was easy and sometimes it wasn't. I think that's the most honest answer. We dedicated a lot of time to codifying our approach and what our value elements looked like. And so throughout this process, when there were disagreements, we would prop them up and then compare. And so whenever we didn't agree on something, you know, it almost created a burden of proof based on what we had already built in order to kind of get critical mass to agreement on a certain situation. And there were certainly times when there were folks that were in the minority who defended a position successfully and swayed the team, right? This is an iterative process, and it's one that takes patience because there are always going to be disagreements. You know, the 5 folks that contributed towards the development of this, you know, we did all have different opinions. We do have different backgrounds and diversity of thought. And so from that, it was really about understanding the context of what we were trying to accomplish. We were trying to understand what Haven Hot Chicken is. And we had to understand that Haven Hot Chicken is greater than the sum of the parts of each of the individuals founding the organization, right? And so after a while, these sessions actually got easier over time because it became more and more clear what Haven Hot Chicken was, because we could feel it. And so I don't know if that perfectly answers the question, but that's what the experience was like.
Yeah, thank you, Aiken. So our next question is asking if you can elaborate a little bit more on the one-piece flow and how it was faster than batching. I think potentially the concept can be elusive. Can you get inside some of the details of it and expand some more on how you recognized, when you recognized it was actually faster?
So, well, when we actually recognized it was in the middle of a pop-up. One of the other co-founders, a gentleman by the name of Evan, was, toasting multiple buns at once, putting out multiple papers at once, and that creates a lot of downtime. I mean, as you're placing all those papers, there's a bun that's toasted, and it could have sauce on it, and it could have coleslaw on it, it could have pickles on it. And if you went through and made that one sandwich, you could have passed it to the consolidator, and that person could have fulfilled an order. But that consolidator is standing there doing nothing because you're toasting 4 or 5 buns, which pushes that problem down the line even further. It's like the production line stops. You have to get that, whatever's the snag, you have to push that through so that everybody else can keep doing their process. And I believe it was Steve that stopped him in the middle of, doing everything and said, like, hey, why don't you just, make one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. And then we went back and watched the video and we timed ourselves. And I believe it saved 9 seconds per item, which, when you're talking 34 to 45 seconds, 9 seconds is a ton of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a great video of Evan burning buns, which happens all the time when you're trying to do multiple things at the time we were doing pop-ups, so we didn't have a bun toaster where the bun automatically slides out, and they were toasting on a grill. So it was, you could burn the bun, but there's that, when you have problems in a batch, it creates bigger problems. And it's funny because later on, after we'd had the learning and we're doing things one piece flow, we were having a barbecue together outdoors and socially distanced. And I heard Evan telling the story about when I coached him to just do things one at a time instead of 5 at a time. And his inner monologue was saying, yeah, okay, guy. But later, once he started doing, it's like, oh, this is better and faster and simpler, and no more burn buns.
That's great. There's a question in regards to the hero item concept. And so how did you balance the desire to be inclusive, right? So to add menu items, ingredients, and prep, but keep it simplified from a work perspective, right? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I'm going to speak for a moment and then probably pass it to Rob for a bit more detail on the actual operation and execution side. But for us, we didn't believe that the hero item and providing inclusiveness was necessarily mutually exclusive. So we were able to solve a lot of those problems so halal chicken is something I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. You can just source halal chicken, and then all of your chicken can be halal, and it doesn't leave anybody else out by being halal versus not halal, but all of a sudden your entire halal community is included. And then similarly for vegetarians, we couldn't use chicken, but we could use almost the entirely same process to produce a vegetarian item, and just the base of it needed to be different. And so I'll let Rob talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I think getting back to our core values and what we're trying to provide the customer was central in helping to define what is uniqueness, and so if we're trying to make sure that you can get in and out of Haven Hot Chicken in under 5 minutes, if you're trying to make sure that that piece of chicken is crispy, crunchy, juicy, and spicy and delicious every single time, there has to be some level, I guess, of commodification and standardization of the process. But then, you get to express yourself in other ways, like limited time offers, and analyzing customer data. And, we send out polls to our, loyalty members and get their feedback and see what they actually would like to offer. but then we always tie it back to what our values are and what makes Haven Hot Chicken Haven Hot Chicken. And that's the avenue that we get to express our uniqueness in, you know, within the confines of a process.
Yeah, thank you for that. It leads right into another question that's here, and that is, like, how did you convert the customer feedback that you gathered into what you all thought was important and what you would actually then do? Like, what was the trade-off of decision logic? How did you approach that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we had a guest, to use the opposite example, we had, after serving thousands and thousands of guests in the 4 months since we've been open, we had a guest request that we start carrying whole grain mustard as a condiment. It's the first time we've heard of it. And apologies to that guy, we're probably not going to start carrying whole grain mustard, right? However, through the pop-ups, what we were able to achieve is consistent signals and feedback. So, you know, I hear that a lot of convenience stores that, you know, can only carry limited inventory, once they're asked for something 3 times by 3 separate people on 3 separate occasions, they start listening and think about maybe carrying that product. And so similarly for us, we found right from the beginning, vegan was the first call out, and vegan it still eludes us a little bit, but we kept hearing about vegetarian. We kept getting questions about halal. We kept getting questions about price point and all of these components. And so once the signal was clear enough, and once the signal was loud enough, we were able to iterate and work to accommodate it. You know, at the end of the day, I called vegan is a gap for us right now from a menu perspective. But again, I think it shows the give and take where you can only stray so far from what the original intent of the concept is. We strive to be an authentic Nashville hot chicken restaurant. And so there are some limitations from a production perspective on how we can achieve something for everyone. But we always strive to be as inclusive and as accessible as possible as a result.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. What was the most counterintuitive lesson that you learned for Rob and Eken, and how has that helped you get on board with that lesson? So what was most, I guess, more different than traditional thinking? So what was the strongest aha moment that you had, and how did that help you get on board? How did it come to be? I
think, at least for me, and I'll let Rob go after, but I think for me is that the texture of our team was very solution oriented. We're solutioners and biased to action, and we like to solve problems in the now and move quickly and deal with things and then move on. To slow things down and to think about them properly, apply Kaizen. That was a fundamental shift in our way of thinking and the way in which we made decisions. And so now we like to think of ourselves as a data-driven business where, you know, it's much easier to make decisions because if we don't have enough data, we know we need to collect more in order to make a responsible business decision. So at least for me and my natural proclivity to act on things and to make decisions and to move forward, slowing things down was counterintuitive, and ultimately it's now a foundation of how we operate. So I think it's added a lot of value. But what about you, Rob?
So I think for me, a lot of it was just trusting the process, you know, and you know, like the just-in-time inventory applies to so many aspects of my job, both from you know, chicken that's ready to be sold, chicken that's in the process, chicken that's coming in, you know, through the supply chain, and looking at the data and saying, well, actually on a Thursday, I know I only sell 9 cases of chicken. You know, I have 11, I don't actually need to order it. And, you know, you're inherently, you know, you want to stockpile to protect your ability to serve the guest. But if you have this data and you rely on it and you trust it and you follow it, you can really dial in a lot of other aspects of the business.
Right.
And other than French fries, always have enough French fries.
Right. Can you walk through 1 or 2 sample items that you identified on the customer journey? Tell us some more detail about it. From greeting the customer.
Yeah, sure. So I think from a customer journey perspective, one of the biggest components for us were around the in-store experience. I touched on it a little bit earlier, but having an intuitive and easy to understand ordering process and what to do inside of the restaurant was one of the biggest challenges we faced. My least favorite thing when I walk into, whether it's a coffee shop or an office or a lobby, is to not know what to do next. Like it's my least favorite feeling. Like I don't belong. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not in the club. And so for us, we paid a lot of attention and detail to making sure that when you walk through our doors or when you visit our website or when you visit our social media, that it's apparent what you're supposed to do next. And so when you walk into Haven, there are visual and physical cues that guide you into the process. We have on our menu, there are certain requirements, forced modifiers for the restaurant folks that you are required to make decisions on in order to complete an order. And so we know that that's a truth of our menu. And so again, how to Haven is part of our menu, and it's a visible structure and component within that. Because again, you don't want a guest to be on the defensive from the outset when they're visiting your space. You want them to feel comfortable, like they can understand, and that they feel like they belong there because they understand what they're supposed to do next. That was probably for me the most important component from the customer journey map for me.
Yeah, I think we're still manifesting a little bit of that struggle with our online ordering portal as well. We've done a great job with the visual cues and the menu design inside the space to inform the customer, like you're going to pick a protein style, tenders or sandwich. You're going to pick a heat level. You're going to pick a side. You're going to pick a drink. But then, with the success of our online ordering, we now have people that regularly call and say, I couldn't figure out how to add a sauce. And it's like, well, it's that little drop-down menu that says add sauces. But unfortunately, it's not all laid out for them as clearly as I think we'd like. And so it's a gap that we're currently trying to fill. But that challenge of educating the customer with how to get to complete their order process, and also physically what they do when they're in their space, is manifesting in all the different aspects of, sales and customer acquisition as well.
Yeah. That's great. We'll take about 2 more questions. There's a question here in regards to, have you been exposed to a lean principle that you have yet to find a way to apply, or that you have found that doesn't apply, that you haven't been able to either translate and leverage in order to kind of design how the work is done or positively impact the business? Is there anything that's a gap?
I don't know if Brian and Steve have any initial thoughts here.
So we have thousands of gaps. I don't know if I would attribute any of them to the difficulty in applying a lean principle. I would say we even though we've really dialed in the chicken sandwich work routine, there's probably a lot more we could do to standardize other processes, especially in the back of house. We've got some good things happening from a system standpoint, but in terms of the left-hand, right-hand work that people are doing back there, it's an opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. And then there's a question here in regards to your supply chain. So have you been able to, and if so, how have you been applying Kaizen to your supply chain?
So in addition to just making data-driven decisions, which I really can't emphasize enough. Looking at your numbers on a weekly basis, making sure that you're actually dialing in what you need at any given time lets you to, not have money sitting on the shelves. That's, one. But I think ultimately the idea that you can always improve, you can always negotiate a better price, you can always find a different supplier. Those are things that never stop. If you stop doing that, you're going to be leaving opportunities on the table. that you would otherwise be able to benefit from. And, you know, it's a reoccurring part of my job is to turn this person against this person and say like, well, I can get this price from this person. I can get this price from this person. They'll deliver on Saturdays. They won't deliver on Saturdays, you know, and making everything work for you and eventually the guest as well, you know.
I think another time we saw this was in our, when we talk about supply chain and procurement and competitive pricing from major distributors like Cisco versus the local like restaurant wholesale warehouse. And we'd be like, well, if we just drive 15 minutes to Restaurant Depot, we can get something way cheaper than we can get it, you know, but at the end of the day, it's like, is it a repeatable, scalable, simple process that we can count on and rely on every day? And so like a lot of those components, we were able to, again, iterate and collect data on and realizing like, you know, looking at the last month, it's like, oh, I've had to drive to another part of the state a dozen times, and different components like that. And so, but yeah, overall, Rob's the master behind most of the procurement and supply chain. So
yeah, I mean, I'm actually, now that I'm thinking about it even more, you know, we purchase, you know, our packaging in bulk right now because you get a much better deal per unit price when you order 50,000 boxes rather than 5,000 boxes. You know, but that's manifesting a problem currently with the fact that we are not yielding enough orders of side orders of French fries per case, you know, based off what our projections were and what our reality is, you know. Well, you can't give someone a box of food that doesn't look like it has enough French fries in it. So we got a smaller box, but because we bought a batch of boxes, you know, to bring it all back together, we can't pivot and put less fries in the new box till we run through the 20,000 boxes that we have currently. So we have a plan. We're going to be changing it, but our supply chain constraints are driving us to take an incidental cost in the short term on these larger portions of French fries. And so I think, like, you know, if we had been able to provide or to buy less boxes, we could pivot quicker. But unfortunately, the realities of procurement just don't really allow for that right now.
Yeah, that's great learning. Thank you for that. There's one more question here. I can't close this out without asking, and that is, what has been the impact for the cooks and the line workers? Have they felt more empowered through the lean implementation and having this? What's been the impact on the team members?
So it's magical to watch someone's brain like get it. You know, I'm actually training an employee right now, and one of the first day we were working together, and you know, we get this huge order, and right now we get an individual item ticket for every item that's on a customer's order. And we do this because that sticky ticket goes on the item and it gets sent through the window. So that way you can't confuse this is this item, you know where it's going to go. It eliminates verbal communication of information. And guy got a huge number of tickets, like, you know, 12 tickets at a time, put them all up. And then he proceeds to do, you know, lay out all 12 pieces of paper, try and toast 12 buns, set up all these boxes. And I was like, no. Just make one. And he looked at me and he was like, you really just want me to make one? I'm like, just make one. And we got through this process. And he's like, it was really easy. I'm like, yeah, I know, it's really easy. And if you don't have to think about all the stuff that you're trying to do, you know, the 11th item in the line, you can just chug along one item at a time. And on this guy's first day, he could, you know, put out sandwiches on a Saturday night, which anyone who works in the restaurant industry knows you're going to get your butt handed to you on a Saturday night, the first night of your job.
One more story, if I can add it, is that I heard one team member at one point say, this lean stuff is crazy. I can't even brush my teeth the same way anymore. So talking about like what it does, it changes a person fundamentally in all aspects of their life.
You see waste everywhere.
Yeah, that's so true. That's great. We cannot thank you enough for really going deep on the learning. What is your next biggest challenge? What are you about to tackle? What's the biggest problem you're at now?
Expansion.
People.
How do we scale and maintain culture, maintain quality, maintain all of the things that we're able to physically be present for and take care of? How do we engender that trust and training in a team to be able to manage that on our behalf? Rob's days of actually producing the chicken and actually managing a single location those days are numbered, and moving beyond that is our current exciting challenge.
Well, we hope that we can check in with you in a few months and you can share more of what you've been learning. Thank you so very much, everyone, for joining us. Please don't forget, head over to lean.org and check out the virtual lean learning experience. We designed it with you in mind to help you bring together the convenience of online technology and growing a library of learning for your organization. Thank you guys very much. I hope that you stay safe and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
For having us.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.